In this video, we will review the complete process for data extraction, processing, and uploading into Power BI to create a wealth management report. The report we'll create will include household and account balances, asset allocation, performance, inflows and outflows, as well as annual returns for each year. To begin the process, you will log into your Endex portal and go to the list of accounts or households you would like to generate the reports for. In this case, we'll generate reports for all households, and the first step is going to be under Batch Reports and selecting households, and then generate a monthly rate of return report that will be produced with yearly returns. This will generate a PDF file, which we will then convert to an Excel file so it can be uploaded into Power BI. We will then go to Batch Exports and start exporting the data that's needed to produce the report. The first data export will be to export the household, account, and position data for each of the households. Within Endex, you can create templates that will store the fields that you've used for generating the report so that when they're regenerated, you can simply select that template and click Export. In this case, we have a household and account export template saved utilizing these fields at the household level, and these fields at the account level, and these fields at the position level, and we're also going to select to include non-managed positions as well as the cash balance. We have an additional field here, which is the classification. Depending on the report you would like to create, you may select different export options, but these are the ones that will be needed for producing the report we intend to create. The last step is to export the data to an Excel file so that it can then be uploaded to Power BI. We will then move on to exporting the activities, and within the activities export area, there are many different activity types that can be exported. And again, depending on the report you intend to create, you may select all or certain activity types for export. In this case, we're going to export the income for all households back to inception. And here are all the data points that need to be exported for the income to be included in the report. Scroll to the bottom and click Export. And again, that will create an Excel file that can be uploaded into Power BI. The next data set will be returns. You have multiple options for generating return exports from Endex. The first export will be rolling returns. And the data fields, again, will depend on the report you would like to create, as well as the amount of data history in your database. But here is the list of data fields we'll need for this particular report. In addition to the rolling returns, you can also export data fields that will include beginning and ending balances for each time frame, as well as inflows, outflows, and net invested amount. These data points can be used if you would like to create a performance report with much more detail for each time frame. The third option for exporting returns data is at the top of the page. You have the option for producing a detailed export for specific time frames. For this report, what we're going to do is export data for 3 time frames, one since inception, 1 year to date, and one for the last month. So we'll enter the data we need for each of these time frames. First one being year to date. So this export will be from the end of December 2022 to the end of the previous month. The next one will be for the last month, and then the last one will be since inception, and we'll simply enter a date that we know will be prior to the inception date for all accounts. Once these 3 exports are generated, we will cover how to combine these into one file to get them ready for uploading into the Power BI platform. Here is a sample of the detailed performance report, which again shows the detailed information for each time frame. In this case, this is the information since inception. So you have your beginning balance, your flows, and gross as well as net performance. Again, we will cover the process for combining these 3 separate files into one file so that they can be used for creating a table that'll include this information for each time frame exported for. We're going to save these 3 files into one folder, and we're going to cover how to combine these 3 files into one file in preparation for uploading it into Power BI a little bit later in this video. Here we see the income data that has been generated since inception. In this case, the data will include the household ID and account ID. We will be processing this at the household level. And you'll notice at the bottom, this is a large file. There's 5 separate sheets within this file. And shortly, we will cover how to consolidate this and create one file so your income data is ready to be uploaded into Power BI. Earlier, we processed an annual return file that's generated in a PDF. And this needs to be converted into an Excel file so it can be uploaded. We'll use a system called Able to Extract to convert the PDF file into an Excel file. So up in the top left, we'll click on Open, and upload our PDF into the Able to Extract system. We're going to convert it to an Excel file, and when you click on Excel, a pop-up window will appear so you can specify how you would like the data processed. In this case, we'll select to perform additional content analysis on each page and click OK. We now have the table processed, and we're going to now convert it to an Excel file. We'll click on Convert to Excel in the ribbon at the top. We now have this converted to an Excel file, and with some additional editing within Power BI, we'll be able to include this data in our reports. Now we will process the 3 files we exported with the household performance detail and combine those files into one file for uploading into Power BI. Here we see the folder that those 3 files have been saved in, and here are the 3 files within the Performance and Flows folder. We're going to open a new Excel spreadsheet and select Get Data, and then From File, and then select From Folder, and select the folder that has those 3 files. Click on Open, and here we have the 3 files loaded into the new Excel spreadsheet. At the bottom of the page, select Combine, and then Combine and Transform Data. You'll see a sample of the data that will be uploaded, and here the 3 files have been uploaded into the Excel query editor for you to process these 3 files and combine them into one file. Some steps that will be taken to complete the processing of this file will be to get rid of the blank lines and make a household name, household ID, and model be the headers for the file. Here we'll use the Remove Rows function and remove this first row, which says ROR export, because this is an unnecessary row in the file. So we'll go ahead and remove that row. We'll select Remove Top Rows and just select the first row as the one we'll remove from the file. Now that we've removed that first row that was unnecessary for the file, we'll continue on with processing the data for export and then upload into Power BI. I have created a filtered version of the file to make it easier to follow along with completing the process. The next thing we'll do is we want the first row to be our headers for each column. You can see here we have household name and household ID as the first row. We're going to promote those as headers. By going to the top ribbon, we can select Use First Row as Headers, and that will move that first row up into the headers of each column. Now we have household name and household ID as headers, but you can see that those values are still in the table. So we'll filter each column to get rid of the row that contains that information. We do this by hitting our drop down and deselecting household name. I've already completed these steps, so I'll just cancel this and go to the next step, which is to filter those rows. So now those rows have been removed from the table. The next thing we want to do is change the data types of some of our columns. You can see that there's columns with values in them, but as indicated at the header of each column, each of these columns is still considered a text. So we'll right-click on the column and select Change Type and select Decimal Number to change the data type for these columns. So now each of these columns is considered a decimal number as opposed to a text. Now we're going to remove some of the columns that are unnecessary. I don't need the column for service fees. I don't need the column for outflows and service fees, as well as the gross ROR. So I'll remove those columns. And to do so, I'll click on the columns I want to remove and select service fees and the other columns I would like to remove from the table. And once I've highlighted each one of them, right-click and select Remove Columns. Now I'd like to rename some of the column headings. And to do so, I would right-click on the column heading and select Rename. I'll do that for each of the columns I want to rename, and now we have the columns labeled as we would like. Now, since this data file does not include a column called Change in Value, we're going to create one by adding a custom column. And to do so, you'll go to the top of the page, select Add Column, Custom Column. I'll go ahead and click Insert since we're doing this in the middle of this query. I'm going to cancel this because this is already done, but I want to demonstrate. So we're going to call this column Change in Value. And what we want in the formula, you can see that there's an equal sign, which indicates we're going to create a mathematical formula. We want the ending value, so I'll double click on ending value, minus the beginning value, minus the inflows, and then minus the outflows. The outflows are negative numbers, so those outflows will be added back in. So the change in value will be our ending balance minus the starting balance, minus whatever was deposited, but then adding back in whatever was withdrawn. So I'll click OK, and here we have the custom column at the end of the table. Next, we'll change the data type. So this becomes a decimal number, and I'm going to reorder the columns by dragging them into the position I would like them within the table. So I'm going to move the change in value column to just left of the ending value. I'm also going to move the first column, which has a list of file names, into the third column so it's next to the columns with all of the values. I also don't need in this table the rate of return column, so I'm going to remove this column. Again, right-click and select remove, and that'll remove that column. And the next thing I'm going to do is highlight each of the value columns and go to the top ribbon, select Unpivot Only Selected Columns. And that will rearrange the table so each of those columns becomes just one column under Attribute. Now what I'm going to do is highlight the column with the file names, click on Transform, and then Pivot Column, and a dialog box will open that shows that we're pivoting on the column titled HH Performance and Flow, and the column we want to pivot on is the Values column. So I'll click OK, and now we have these three columns with the values associated with each time frame. I'm going to rename these columns. So now we have the 1 month, inception, and year-to-date columns. I'm going to reorder them so that we have 1 month, year-to-date, and since inception. The next thing I'm going to do is add a column that I can use to sort. Add this data to a table in Power BI. The order for each row is correct. You can see that Power BI will default to an alphabetical order, and I want this arranged so that the first row in my table is beginning value, the second row is inflows, the next row is outflows, and so forth. So I'm going to create a column that'll allow me to control the sort order when this data is added to a table. So I'm going to click on the attribute column and go to Add Column, Column from Examples, and I'm going to select From Selection. I've already done this. I will insert it just to demonstrate. So now we have a new column over here. Under Column 1, we can enter values manually. And what I'm going to do is enter numbers that'll help me sort this data once it's added to a table. I'm going to want the beginning value in row 1, the inflows in row 2, the outflows in row 3, the change in value in row 4, and then the ending value in row 5. And you can see that Power BI is using IntelliSense to recognize the pattern I'm establishing here with entering this data, and it'll fill the rest of the rows for me. So I'll click OK, and now we have a new column, which again we'll use to sort. So I'll rename this Sort Order. I'm going to change the type to a whole number, and to do this again I would right-click and select Change Type and select Whole Number. I'm going to reorder the columns. I'll make the sort order the first column. And I'm going to rename two columns. I've misspelled inception here, and I'm going to change the heading for this column called attribute to period. So to do this, I would right-click and rename. So now these columns have been renamed. At this point, this data is prepared for upload to Power BI, and the last step would be to select File and either Close and Load, or if this is the first time you've processed this file, you would select Close and Load To. And then you would have the option of saving this to the same file or saving it to a new file. If this is the first time you've processed this file, you would select Close and Load To, and you could save it to the same file or you could save it to a new file, but you'll have that choice once you select that option. Since I've already gone through this process, I will simply select Close and Load. In the next video, we'll proceed with processing this data and uploading it into the Power BI desktop, as well as process the additional files that we have exported from Endex.